Well, hello, listeners. This is the original Unrelegated creator and host, Jay Riddle. If you forgot you subscribed to this podcast, it wouldn't be surprising, as I believe it's been over 7 years since an episode has been published. If you need a refresher or have just come across this podcast and are listening to Unrelegated for the first time, let me reintroduce myself. My name is Jay Riddle, and I'm an avid soccer fan and founding member of Atlanta United since its establishment as an expansion team in Major League Soccer. I've also been an Arsenal supporter since 2002 and a rabid consumer of first-tier soccer from many leagues across Europe, Mexico, and South America. But primarily, this podcast was and will remain focused on Atlanta United and Major League Soccer. As I record this, Atlanta has just hosted its second World Cup match at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, or Atlanta Stadium, as FIFA would apparently prefer everyone to call it. And the city is absolutely buzzing. More than 150,000 people are estimated to have attended the official Atlanta FIFA Fan Festival at Centennial Olympic Park, and it's been incredible to see the city embrace the sport in a way that would have seemed unimaginable 20 years ago. And it is reinvigorated me. I've attended the fan festival. I've been going to watch parties, and it's just very exciting and an exciting time to live in Atlanta. Now, I took a hiatus from creating Atlanta United content for many years and for many reasons, but that doesn't mean I ever stopped attending matches or following the team closely or caring deeply about the club. However, after watching the decline in Atlanta United's roster, the erosion of the club's identity, and the team's overall performance deteriorate over time, I felt it was time to throw my hat into the ring again and begin creating content and offering my own perspective during a period when fan engagement is arguably at an all-time low. I hope to begin publishing episodes more regularly and have already started posting content across several platforms. If you'd like to read some of my recent essays on Atlanta United, including my piece titled What I Would Do If I Were Mauricio Culebro, who is the incoming president of soccer for Atlanta United, or if you want to consume some of my more satirical content, you can find me on Substack and Blue Sky at the letter J, the letter W, Riddle. On X and Instagram, you can find me as JWRiddle_. And you'll probably see me lurking around the Atlanta United subreddit now as well. So, with that being said, after more than 7 years away from the public sphere, I have a lot to say about the current state of the club. So, let's dive in. I think the best place to start is with a simple question. How did Atlanta United get here? Because for those of us who have been around since the beginning, the current version of Atlanta United feels very different from the club that entered Major League Soccer in 2017. And when Atlanta arrived, the organization seemed to have a very clear vision. We had Darren Eales as president, who was very transparent. He would attend tailgates. He was very active on social media. We had Carlos Bocanegra as sporting director and Tata Martino as coach. And Arthur Blank built a club that wasn't simply trying to compete in MLS. Atlanta was trying to redefine what an expansion club could be. You know, this was well before Inter Miami and Messi, and Atlanta was in the spotlight. The front office aggressively targeted young talent with upside from South America. Miguel Almiron arrived from Paraguay and, yes, was eventually sold to Newcastle United for a profit. Joseph Martinez became the league's most feared striker at the time, and we had Tito Villalba, Julian Gressel, Leandro Gonzalez-Perez, or LGP, and others who formed a core of a team that won MLS Cup in just its second season. You know, we had veterans from MLS, Michael Parkhurst, Jeff Lorenowitz, eventually Nagby. And what made Atlanta special wasn't simply the spending. Atlanta was spending intelligently. And sure, you know, Atlanta was the biggest spender for a few seasons, and that definitely helps. But the club was identifying talent before it became expensive, and it was creating value. And perhaps most importantly, it had a recognizable identity, playing entertaining soccer. Fast forward to today, and that identity feels far less clear. Since lifting MLS Cup in 2018, Atlanta United has cycled through numerous coaches, spent enormous sums of money on transfer fees, watched numerous high-profile signings fail to meet expectations, and repeatedly found itself searching for answers. Now, every club makes mistakes. Every sporting director misses on players, and every coach can get things wrong. That's soccer. But at some point, you begin noticing patterns. And I think that's where we as Atlanta United fans currently find ourselves. The frustration isn't simply about losing. I think we as supporters can handle losing for the most part. I think what many of us are struggling with now is a level of confusion. What is the plan? Where is the vision? What is Atlanta United trying to achieve? Those questions feel far less clear today than they did 7 or 8 years ago. And one of the biggest reasons for that uncertainty is roster construction. Atlanta United has spent significant resources in recent years, but the return on investment has often been difficult to identify. The club has allocated major salary resources towards veteran players and international players, expensive signings, while simultaneously moving on from younger players and homegrowns who might have represented long-term value. The abject failure that is the $22 million Latte Lot signing is clearly one example. Another, an aging nostalgic acquisition and arguably a depreciating asset with little upside compared to his salary, is Miguel Almiron. Azalte and his $1 million plus salary for little to no valuable output is another, and I could go on and on. But the center back position is perhaps the most recent example of poor roster building and questionable decision-making by the front office. Over the years, Atlanta has spent heavily on multiple defenders, having one of the most expensive backlines in MLS, while never truly establishing itself as one of the league's elite defensive teams. At the same time, the departures of homegrown defenders Noah Cobb and Efren Morales left many supporters scratching their heads. All of these decisions over recent years have raised legitimate questions. And those questions bring us to Mauricio Culebro, who is rumored to be doing his first press conference as incoming president of soccer early next week. Now, for me, the most important thing about Mauricio isn't whether he immediately influences roster building decisions this summer or affecting any individual player signing. It's not even whether Atlanta brings in any new designated players this summer or after the end of the season. My hope for that happening is actually very low. We have no reason, and the team has shown us no record recently, to believe that there's going to be any big changes this summer, and that's depressing. So the most important thing Culebro can do, in my opinion, is determine how Atlanta United's roster decisions are being made. That's ultimately what inspired my most recent essay on Substack. Sure, I used the essay as an opportunity to hypothesize on the types of transfer targets there might be, but it wasn't just about hypothetical roster changes. It wasn't even primarily about Chris Henderson or Garth Lagerwey or any individual executive. It was about the player recruitment and roster building process. Because when you examine Atlanta United's struggles over the last several years, the common thread isn't one bad signing, it isn't one bad coach, and it isn't one disappointing season. It's a pattern of expensive decisions that have not consistently produced results, a pattern of spending significant resources without creating any value, a pattern of moving on from young talent while continuing to invest heavily in older, more expensive players, getting away from balancing a roster with the right combination of youth, MLS veterans, and international playmakers. And when patterns emerge, leadership has a responsibility to investigate them. That's why I believe Mauricio Culebro's first months on the job should be spent conducting a comprehensive audit of the organization. Not a public relations exercise. No more buzzwords. No more be patient. Not a symbolic gesture. A real audit. And he should clearly communicate this to the fan base in a transparent fashion. How are players being identified? Who is involved in the scouting process? We have the same head of player recruitment, John Spector, yet things have been declining. What's going on here? We have one of the best data analytics divisions, supposedly, in MLS. Garth Lagerwey invested heavily in that area when he was here and in sports science. How are analytics incorporated into the decision-making process? How on earth could an analytical approach or statistics arrived at massively expensive flops like Latte Lot or expensive salary signings for nostalgic buys like Miguel Almiron? Who determines whether a player fits into the tactical model, and who approves the contract terms? Who's signing off on these transfer fees? It feels like we're being taken for a ride by every club or team or agent that we call. And perhaps most importantly, where does accountability exist when those decisions fail? Because until Atlanta understands where the breakdowns are occurring, the club risks repeating the same mistakes over and over again, regardless of who occupies the front office. One of the central examples I discussed in my essay was the 2025 transfer window. Last summer, Atlanta spent meaningful resources bringing in players such as Mihai, Barakal, and Azalte. What process could have possibly led to Atlanta concluding these were the best uses of its resources? Were those decisions driven by scouting, analytics, coaching preferences, contract availability? Who advocated for these moves? And how should those decisions be evaluated after the fact? Those are the questions a healthy organization asks itself. It feels like the team is cycled between executives and coaches that have only contributed to a series of increasingly chaotic panic buys that broadcast a culture of putting ticket sales over effective integration with a specific tactical system or even a cultural identity. Now, I'm not saying the answer is necessarily firing people or cleaning house simply to satisfy an increasingly impatient and fed up fan base. The answer lies in understanding what is working and what isn't. Because if there are weaknesses in the recruitment process, fixing those weaknesses will matter far more than any individual transfer. We know Atlanta United still possesses enormous advantages. And even Josh Blank said in a recent interview at an official NWSL Atlanta 2028 event that there have been no limitations set on spending this season. The club is one of the best ownership groups in the league. And as the world is finding out through the World Cup, one of the best stadiums in North America and a world-class training facility. We still have a massive fan base, an excellent academy. Just look at the performances in the recent MLS Next Cup, our U13, our U17. Look at our Atlanta United 2 squad and the performances that they've been having. We have a lot of great things going on, and we still have a massive fan base. And despite raising season ticket prices year after year, regardless of the decline in quality on the pitch, Atlanta is still averaging the highest ticket sales in the league. But discontent, and even worse, a growing sense of apathy among fans is now bubbling to the surface. The challenge facing Mauricio isn't just fixing a terrible roster. The challenge is rediscovering what made Atlanta United successful in the first place. A commitment to smart recruitment, a commitment to accountability and transparency, identifying talent before everyone else, to building value rather than simply spending money. Because ultimately, Atlanta United doesn't need a miracle. There's enough parity still in MLS where a few tweaks can mean the difference in finishing last and making the playoffs. I don't even think the team needs a complete teardown necessarily. What it needs is clarity and to rediscover its identity, to start playing attractive and entertaining soccer again. And it needs a front office capable of honestly evaluating its own decisions. And I don't think that's taking place right now. That's what my recent essay was really about. It was about understanding how Atlanta arrived at this moment and making sure the same mistakes aren't repeated. Now, the next several months may prove to be some of the most important in club history. We have 15 player contracts expiring at the end of this year. The World Cup is bringing renewed energy and a spotlight on Atlanta as a soccer city. We have a brand new U.S. training facility and training ground in Lawrenceville, Georgia. It's bringing more and more attention to Atlanta and the area. So now is the time for bold decisions. We don't need another Garth Lagerwey-esque lecture on being patient. So next week, if Mauricio does indeed have a press conference, I will be paying very close attention. Now, for those of you who listened to Unrelegated all those years ago, I want to thank you for coming back. And for those of you discovering the podcast for the first time, welcome aboard. This is Jay Riddle, and after more than 7 years away, Unrelegated is officially back. I encourage you to seek me out on Substack and social media. Say hello, drop me some feedback on your own thoughts, and thanks for listening.